Hi there. Welcome to our English. If you are eager to improve your English skills, this is the perfect place for you. Don't go anywhere and talk with our engaging lessons.
In a small town where everyone knows each other, one evening, a peculiar event unfolded that would leave residents talking for years. The story of Sarah and the mysterious stranger became a local legend, a tale passed down through generations, reminding everyone of the thin line between reality and the unknown. The setup. It was a quiet Friday night in the town of Maplewood. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the streets. Sarah, a dedicated high school teacher, was driving home after a long day filled with lesson plans, reading papers, and engaging with her students. The hum of her car was the only sound in the stillness of the evening. As she navigated the familiar roads, she reflected on her week. Teaching was her passion, but it often left her feeling exhausted. She loved her students, but sometimes wished for a little excitement in her life. As she turned down a dimly lit road, she noticed a figure standing by the roadside, a man in a long coat looking lost and out of place. Feeling a mix of concern and curiosity, Sarah decided to stop and offer help. The man, who introduced himself as Alex, explained that he had missed the bus and was trying to get to a nearby town. He seemed polite and grateful, so she invited him to hop in. The journey begins. As they drove, Sarah and Alex engaged in light conversation. He spoke of his travels, sharing stories from various places he had visited. His voice was smooth and his tales were captivating, drawing her in. He talked about the mountains of Colorado, the beaches of California, and the bustling streets of New York City. Each story painted vivid images in Sarah's mind, sparking her imagination and igniting a sense of wanderlust she hadn't felt in years. "Have you ever traveled outside of Maplewood?" Alex asked, glancing at her with interest. "Not really," Sarah admitted. "I've always been focused on my career. I guess I never found the time." "You should," he encouraged. "There's a whole world out there waiting to be explored. You never know what you might discover about yourself." His words resonated with her, and for a moment she considered the possibilities. What if she took a break? What if she ventured out into the world? The thought was exhilarating yet terrifying. As they continued down the winding road, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was slightly off about Alex. It wasn't anything specific, it was more of a gut feeling. He was charming and charismatic, but there was an underlying intensity in his demeanor that made her uneasy. The change in atmosphere. As they approached the town's outskirts, Sarah felt the atmosphere shift. The trees lining the road grew denser, their branches intertwining overhead like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. The air felt heavier, and the once comforting darkness now seemed foreboding. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, glancing at Alex. He had fallen silent, staring out the window as if lost in thought. "Just enjoying the view," he replied, his voice distant. The way he said it sent a shiver down her spine. It was as if he were seeing something she couldn't. "What do you see?" she pressed, trying to lighten the mood. "Just memories," he said cryptically, turning to meet her gaze. "Places I've been, people I've met. It all blurs together after a while." Sarah felt a chill creep up her spine. There was something about his words that felt ominous, as if he were hinting at experiences that were better left unspoken. She shook off the unease and focused on the road ahead. Suddenly, Alex pointed to a fork in the road. "Take the left path. It's a shortcut," he suggested. Hesitant but trusting, Sarah followed his direction. The road became narrower and more winding, surrounded by tall trees that loomed overhead. The headlights of her car illuminated the path, but shadows danced just beyond the reach of the light, creating an unsettling atmosphere, a sense of dread. As they ventured deeper into the woods, Sarah's unease grew. The air felt thick, and the silence was oppressive. She could hear her own heartbeat, a steady drum echoing in her ears. Glancing at Alex, she noticed he was now staring intently at the trees, his expression unreadable. "Are you sure this is the right way?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Trust me," he replied. But there was an edge to his tone that made her stomach churn. "We're almost there." The deeper they drove, the more isolated they felt. The road was lined with dense foliage, and the darkness seemed to close in around them. Sarah's grip on the steering wheel tightened as she fought the growing sense of dread. Had always been a rational person, but something about this situation felt surreal. Just then Alex turned to her, his eyes glinting in the dim light. You know, some people say this road is haunted, he said casually, as if discussing the weather. Haunted? Sarah laughed nervously, trying to dismiss the tension in the air. That's just a story to scare people, is it? He replied, his voice low and serious. People have gone missing around here. Some say they encountered a stranger who led them to their doom. The chill in her spine returned, and she forced herself to focus on the road. That's just a myth, she insisted, though her heart raced. We're fine. The unsettling encounter. After a few more minutes of driving, Sarah spotted something strange in the rearview mirror, a flicker of movement. She turned her head quickly, but there was nothing there, just darkness and the looming trees. Did you see that? She asked, her voice shaking. See what? Alex replied, his gaze fixed ahead. Something in the mirror. It looked like someone was following us, she said, her voice rising in panic. Relax, he said, a hint of amusement in his tone. It's just your imagination. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The tension in the car was palpable, and she felt a wave of panic wash over her. She needed to get back to the main road. Let's turn around, she said firmly. This doesn't feel right. As she made the U-turn, Alex suddenly said, "This is my stop." He pointed to a small, unmarked path leading into the woods. Confused, Sarah slowed down. "Are you sure?" she asked, her heart pounding in her chest. He nodded, opening the door before she could protest. "Thank you for the ride," he said, his smile unsettling. "Remember, not everything is as it seems." With that, he stepped out of the car and walked into the darkness, disappearing among the trees. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she watched him go, a mix of relief and dread flooding her senses. The drive home. Shaken, she quickly drove back to the main road, her mind racing. Who was Alex? Why had he chosen that path? The encounter left her with more questions than answers, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As she drove home, thoughts of the mysterious stranger swirled in her mind. She recalled the stories she had heard growing up, tales of people who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but questions. That she just picked up someone who was more than he seemed. When she finally arrived home, Sarah parked her car and took a deep breath. The familiar surroundings of her neighborhood felt comforting, but the memory of Alex lingered like a shadow. She locked her doors and turned on all the lights, trying to dispel the unease that clung to her. The following morning, Sarah woke with a sense of dread. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. After a quick breakfast, she decided to visit the local library to do some research. Maybe she could find out more about the legends surrounding the area. As she entered the library, the smell of old books and polished wood enveloped her. She approached the librarian, Mrs. Thompson, a woman in her 60s with a warm smile. "Good morning, Sarah. What brings you here today?" Mrs. Thompson asked. "I'm looking for information about local legends," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Specifically, stories about disappearances or hauntings." "They're mostly urban legends, but some people believe there's truth to them. Can you tell me more?" Sarah pressed, her curiosity piqued. Mrs. Thompson led her to a section filled with local history books. "This one," she said, pulling out a dusty volume, "contains accounts of strange occurrences in the area. Many people have reported seeing a mysterious stranger on the road, often leading them astray." Sarah flipped through the pages, her heart racing as she read about the vanishing hitchhiker and other tales of lost souls. Each story was eerily similar, recounting encounters with a stranger who appeared out of nowhere, only to vanish without a trace, a haunting discovery. As she delved deeper into the book, one particular story caught her attention. It detailed a young woman who had picked up a hitchhiker on a foggy night, only to have him vanish when she reached her destination. The woman had later discovered that the hitchhiker had died years earlier in a tragic accident. On that very road, Sarah's heart sank. Was this the same road she had traveled with Alex? The realization sent chills down her spine. She quickly jotted down the details and thanked Mrs. Thompson before leaving the library. Back in her car, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she had brushed against something supernatural. The stories she had read echoed in her mind, and she felt an overwhelming urge to return to the spot where she had dropped off Alex. Perhaps there was more to this mystery than she had realized. Returning to the scene, that evening, Sarah drove back to the winding road, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the horizon. As she approached the fork where she had picked up Alex, she felt a sense of foreboding wash over her. She parked her car and stepped out, the cool evening air wrapping around her like a shroud. The trees loomed overhead, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. She took a deep breath and called out, "Alex, are you here?" Silence enveloped her, broken only by the rustling leaves. She felt foolish for calling out, but a part of her hoped for an answer. As she stood there, the shadows seemed to deepen and the air grew colder. Suddenly, she heard a faint whisper, a voice carried on the wind. "Help me," it seemed to say. Sarah's heart raced as she turned to follow the sound, her instincts urging her to explore further. The search for answers. At each step, the darkness closed in around her, but she pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. The whisper grew louder, guiding her deeper into the woods. She felt a strange connection to this place, as if it were calling to her. After a few minutes of walking, she stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood an old, dilapidated cabin, its windows boarded up and its door ajar. The sight sent a shiver down her spine, but she couldn't turn back now. "Hello," she called out, her voice trembling. "Is anyone there?" As she approached the cabin, she noticed something glimmering in the moonlight, a silver locket lying on the ground. She picked it up, her heart racing as she opened it. Inside was a picture of a young woman, her smile hauntingly familiar. It was Sarah, the woman from the stories. In that moment, everything clicked into place. Alex was not just a stranger, he was a part of the legend, a spirit trapped between worlds. The realization hit her like a wave. He had been trying to guide her, to warn her of the dangers that lay ahead. Suddenly, she felt a presence behind her. Turning quickly, she saw a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the clearing. It was Alex, his expression more intense than before. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice echoing in the stillness. "Why did you lead me here?" Sarah demanded, her heart racing. "What do you want from me?" "I am bound to this road, and so are the souls of those who have vanished." Sarah's mind raced as she processed his words. "What happened to you?" she asked, her voice softening. "I lost my way," he admitted, his eyes filled with sorrow. "And now I'm trapped, unable to move on. I thought I could help others, but I only led them to their doom. A choice to make." Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she listened to his story. She felt a deep empathy for him, understanding the weight of his burden. "Is there a way to set you free?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You must confront the darkness that binds me," he replied. "You have the power to break the cycle, but it requires courage and sacrifice." Sarah knew what she had to do. Had to face the fears that had haunted her for so long, the fear of the unknown, the fear of stepping outside her comfort zone. "I'll help you," she said firmly. "Together, we can find a way." As she spoke, the air around them shifted and the shadows began to recede. The cabin seemed to glow with an otherworldly light, illuminating the darkness that had enveloped them. Alex's expression softened, and for the first time, she saw hope in his eyes. The final confrontation. With renewed determination, Sarah led Alex back to the road. They stood at the fork where they had first met, the weight of their shared experience heavy in the air. "This is where it all began," she said, her voice steady. "Are you ready?" he asked. His gaze piercing, Sarah nodded, her heart racing. "I am." As they stood together, the wind picked up, swirling around them like a tempest. Shadows danced in the corners of her vision, and whispers filled the air. "You must confront the darkness," Alex urged. Taking a deep breath, Sarah closed her eyes and focused on the fears that had held her back for so long. She envisioned herself breaking free from the chains of doubt and insecurity, embracing the unknown with open arms. Suddenly, a blinding light enveloped them, and Sarah felt a surge of energy coursing through her. The whispers grew louder, but instead of fear, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. With a final burst of courage, she shouted, "I release you." In that moment, the shadows dissipated, and Alex's form began to shimmer. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice fading. "You've set me free, a new beginning." As the light faded, Sarah opened her eyes to find herself standing alone at the fork in the road. The air felt lighter, and the oppressive darkness had lifted. She took a deep breath, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. The experience had changed her. She no longer felt trapped by her fears. Instead, she felt empowered and alive. With a newfound sense of purpose, she returned to her car, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. As she drove home, the sun began to rise, casting a warm glow over the landscape. The world felt different, filled with possibilities. Sarah knew she would never forget the mysterious stranger who had led her on this journey. But she also knew it was time to forge her own path. Conclusion. The story of Sarah and the mysterious stranger became a legend in Maplewood, a tale of courage, redemption, and the power of confronting one's fears. It served as a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary encounters happen when we least expect them.